Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. We're going to get started in 1 minute. If you are joining us now, welcome. We're going to get started in 1 minute. You can say hello by using the comment area below and let us know where you're coming from. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Preemie Power Week. I'm Fabiana Bacchini, Executive Director of the Canadian Premature Babies Foundation, CPBF, and your host for this event. The Preemie Power Week is the second of two international live series that CPBF is hosting in 2020 in recognition of World Prematurity Day. These education sessions are in collaboration with International Family Integrated Care Committee, the Canadian Association of Neonatal Nurses, EFCNI, and GLANCE, the Global Alliance for the Newborn Care. For those not familiar with CPBF, we are a charitable organization, and our mission is to support and educate Canadian families of premature babies every step of the way. We believe that through consistent information, access to helpful resources, and peer support inside and outside the NICU, we can empower families, ensuring they are ready to care for their baby. Consistent information is especially important today when we are facing a global pandemic. With educational sessions like this, we intend to bring you the guidance of healthcare professionals and the knowledge gathered by researchers around the world. These are valuable tools to help our community raise awareness and advocate for the well-being of families and their babies. I would like to thank AbbVie for the unrestricted educational grant and Pampers for supporting the Preemie Power Week. And today we are starting to started these sessions talking about parental presence in the NICU. We're going to talk about family integrated care, or FICARE, parents as primary caregivers in the NICU. Dr. O'Brien will present on why parent engagement in the care of their infant in the NICU is important for both the infant and the family, and how parental presence needs to be supported even during the COVID-19 epidemic. Dr. Karel O'Brien is a staff neonatologist at Mount Sinai Hospital and associate professor of pediatrics at the University of Toronto. She's a clinical teacher and neonatologist at a very busy perinatal center that specializes in fetal diagnosis and therapy, and also works in the follow-up clinic. She has trained in clinic epidemiology and healthcare research. Her current research has focused on the development of family integrated care, a model that changes how we deliver care to families and their infants in the NICU. And she has recently completed an international trial of this model of care. Dr. O'Brien, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm always so honored to talk to you and to have you sharing your knowledge and expertise in this very important topic right now, parental presence in the NICU.
Good morning, Fabiana. Good morning to everybody else online. I think it's still morning or maybe lunchtime. It's a real pleasure to be here this morning. For some reason, my slides multiplied while I was waiting here on the screen. But one of the things, it's my great pleasure to be the first speaker during Preemie Power Week. This is a really important time for families of preterm infants when we celebrate them and their families around the world. And really, the Canadian Premature Baby Foundation supports the dissemination and knowledge about family integrated care with our FICARE national and international steering committees to support the implementation of family integrated care across Canada. So why family integrated care? Well, my story of family integrated care began in 2010 as a member of a delegation from our hospital to Estonia to hear Dr. Levin and to see his model of humane care in action. Dr. Levin was a pioneer, and he really believed that the mother and the infant should be considered as closed psychosomatic system, and that everyday ward rounds in the NICU should focus not only on the infant, but also on the needs of the mothers. So why is this sort of model of care important? Well, it's really interesting, and we've learned more probably in the last 10 years about this, but that preterm infants have an increased risk of subtle challenges with learning, communication, moving, and behavior. And the behavioral problems specifically can impact the day-to-day function of the family and can have an impact on school success. The cause of behavioral problems appear multifactorial, including biological and environmental factors, especially the effect on parent-infant interactions. So research has shown us that when parents are involved in the care of their infants in the neonatal intensive care unit, that we have better medical outcomes with improved weight gain of the infants, decreased nosocomial infection, decreased parent stress and anxiety, reduction of readmission to hospital, and improved breastfeeding. There is also a potential for better neurodevelopmental outcomes. And we know this because the parent-infant interaction shapes the development of the infant. Parents are really important to the brain development of their infants. Attuned parents can provide developmentally responsive care, which impacts the infant nervous system and furthers normal development. I just want you to look at this little pictogram here, which shows you how much the brain grows while your baby is in the NICU. You can see a lot of the brain development and sulcation actually occurs while the baby is under our care. And we know that there is a real importance of the everyday interaction of parents with their baby in the NICU. The other issue is that parents in the NICU can suffer because of stress and separation, the trauma of NICU care, depression and anxiety, and that the parents' emotional state during their stay in the NICU and beyond will impact their ability to respond to their baby's cues and therefore impacts their infant's development following discharge. I know this was spoken to you last week by one of your other speakers, but there really is, there's good evidence that a stay in the NICU can actually be traumatic for parents. And parents in the NICU have many different stages of trauma. First of all, the unexpected early delivery. Secondly, seeing your baby who's ill and going through traumatic or life-threatening events, or even seeing other babies in the NICU. Also, serial bad news. The principles, therefore, of trauma-informed care apply to the parents as well as to the infant. This is one of my favorite quotes, and it is from Fabiana. Fabiana was one of the parents in our family integrated care study. And she says, through the dark, I could be Gabriel's mum. I was taught touch, the feeling, the interaction, and how all that became Gabriel's best medicine. And Fabiana has remained Gabriel's best medicine going forward in his life. And that's really what we want all parents to be able to do. So here is a slide just depicting the philosophy of family integrated care. Parents parenting in the NICU. The ideal healing environment for an infant needs to include the presence of parents, and their care is critical to their child's well-being. Parents need to learn how to take care of their baby and how to work with the healthcare team. Parents need to be collaborators in care, and they have a role in decision-making. Now, what I want to show you here is that family integrated care is a whole package. It's not just one piece of the model. So, for example, I have people who sort of say, well, parent massage alone, will that work? Or perhaps just parent support or parent counseling, will that work? And no, family integrated is sort of like a whole system of care. It's almost looking at things through a different lens. And this sort of diagram here that we developed with Linda Frank, you can see depicts it as a model of parent-partnered neonatal care. And within that, we can facilitate parent-delivered interventions such as massage or talking or reading to the baby, or parent support interventions like providing supportive physical environments for families or supportive psychological environments. But really, family integrated care is the whole model of care. It's not just those other things are one piece of the puzzle, but without facilitating parental presence, they all fall away. This is the model of family-centered care, because a lot of people ask me about, well, how does family integrated care different from family-centered care? And you can see here that in family-centered care, the model still focuses on professionals providing most of the care, not the family. The family is still really outside the sort of centrum of care, at least in the NICU. And the relationship is generally nurse-patient and nurse-doctor, so the nurse is really the gatekeeper of access to the infant. And this is a very simple diagram of family integrated care, but I hope I depict by the shading here that really here we're all working as a team to take care of the infant, as was in the previous diagram. But you can see here that the family are central to the model of care, and it's really the family who are gatekeepers to access to the infant rather than anybody in the professional team. I'm going to go quickly through the principles of family integrated care, but really they're based on the principles of family-centered care. They're not different than those, but really parents are collaborators in the infant care, and parent learning is facilitated through a robust education program. The family are invited to participate to the best of their ability, and how they participate varies from family to family, depending on where they are in that stage of development. Through participation, parents are asked to present on rounds, not just be present. And this itself is a process. Parents grow into that role. Nursing education is critical so that they have the tools to enable family to be part of the team. The program has to be embedded in the NICU practice and policy. The entire team has to support the program, even, as I say, even the housekeeping staff. Anything else seems like a betrayal to the parents. So you can see we built this sort of what we call the 4 pillars of family integrated care: parent education support, staff education support, environmental supports, and psychosocial supports. And parent partnership is really the goal of this whole program and needs to be built into the model across all parts. This slide is really a slide depicting parent involvement. If you start at the wheel on the far left side of the slide, you can see the parents who come into the NICU, they come in with a strong sense of attachment. But then if they do not receive enough information and support, or are unable to achieve their desired level of involvement, they're at risk for stress and conflict in the NICU. On the other hand, if at the bottom of the slide, you can see if parents' learning is facilitated, the parent can grow to become confident partners in care. And this is what we want to achieve with family integrated care. You need to provide a robust parent education program with both small group classes and in-person coaching at the bedside to truly practice family integrated care. This slide here depicts how parents grow in their skills. So we, as I mentioned before, we invite parents to participate on rounds to the best of their ability in family integrated care. So you can see at the beginning, parents may start just as listening to rounds, but over time in the NICU, they actually will introduce and give report. This is a lot different than just parents being present on rounds. You can also see that there need to be NICU environmental supports to promote prolonged parental presence. Of course, there are challenges to family integrated care. One of the challenges is the changed role of nurses. They really actually ask nurses to be supporters rather than doers, that they actually are partners rather than having full control at the bedside. And we ask our nursing staff to be educators of parents. So what about the impact of family integrated care? Well, we know that family integrated care, from my studies and from others now internationally, this causes better growth of infants in the NICU, more successful breastfeeding on discharge, earlier discharge home, better weight gain and earlier suck achievement, better self-regulation at 18 months corrected age, better motor development at 2 years of age, and better growth following discharge. Parents have told us that FICARE has actually helped them develop better hands-on skill in the NICU, a closer developmental emotional bond with their infant, feel confident and competent taking care of their infants on discharge, and they value the friendship and support of other parents. We've also shown in our studies, in our randomized controlled trial, that parents have decreased stress and anxiety on discharge from hospital and decreased stress related to parenting at 18 months corrected age. And what do health professionals tell us? They say that family integrated care has helped them develop a better relationship with families. It's satisfying to see parents become more competent in communicating with staff and taking care of their infants. So what happened to family integrated care with COVID? I hear all of you telling me the first things that went up were the big stop signs outside our NICUs. There was a study done in the United States by this group, and they reported a cross-sectional survey of 27 NICUs. And you can see that 47% of them had restricted parental presence, most only allowing a single parent to visit in a day. In 7 sites, 3% of them actually completely prohibited parents. So what happened in our response to COVID? Well, I feel that we went back to our old patterns. Our fear of the spread of COVID in our NICUs, the infection of staff, caused us to go back to our usual pattern of care, close down the NICUs, protect our babies. We did not reach out to families. We did not provide education or support to families so that they could better work together with the staff in the NICU. Luckily, we had parent advocates across the world, not only the Canadian Premature Baby Foundation, but also EFCNI and PLANS, who actually advocated for zero separation, together for better care, even in the time of COVID-19. We also had a number of parents who went to the media, and lots of media reports of the problems and of parents being separated from their infant in the NICU. Our team did a review of the literature on the effect of COVID policies on NICU parents and infants. And we found that there's an increasing concern in maternal mental health because of these visiting or parental presence policies. There's also been decreased support for breastfeeding for families in the NICU during COVID. There's concerns around parent-infant bonding. There's been a huge inconsistency across Canada, the United States, and internationally about how parents and infants are cared for across different hospital sites. The infection control policies are different at every hospital. There's also been a concern with the effect of parental wearing of masks on infant speech and language development and on parent-infant bonding. So you can see here is a slide just depicting our national family integrated care co-investigators. This group, alongside with our international family integrated care group, came forward with a statement on parental presence in the NICU during COVID, which we have published on our family integrated care website. And here are some of the pieces of that statement. I'm just going to go through them. First of all, it was basically the guiding principle of this statement is that parents are caregivers, not visitors, and therefore their presence in the NICU should be protected in the same way that other care providers are. So parents should be involved in their infant's care without time restrictions. Both parents should be with their infant on the neonatal unit and postnatal ward unless they are symptomatic or have been advised or required to self-isolate or quarantine. Parents should be provided with the same protection, that is the face mask or protective equipment, as other staff. Parents and staff should adhere to physical distancing policies in the neonatal unit and postnatal ward to protect each other as care providers in the hospital. All parents and staff should be educated and apply appropriate hand and respiratory hygiene measures within the hospital and the home environment. So I think it's really important to actually tell parents how to protect themselves at home and in the home environment so they're less likely to infect other care providers in the hospital. Where possible, a dedicated space should be provided for parents to safely eat and rest on the neonatal unit or nearby so they're close to their infant. Appropriate technological support, including video calling and apps, should not be used to replace parental presence in the neonatal use. but can be used to support parental involvement and communication. We found across the world, a lot of people are using apps or electronic communication with families to support greater communication with families, and that's a great idea, but it actually should not be used as a way of excusing not bringing parents into the unit. That was a really important point that our team wanted to make. We also felt that neonatal teams should make every effort to provide additional measures to support parental presence during COVID. For example, providing medical grade masks for families if that is what is necessary to support their presence in the unit. So the questions about mask and development is really interesting. We did make a comment in our statement about masks as follows. Where a safe physical distance can be maintained between staff and families, parents should be supported to take care of their infant at the cot side without wearing a mask covering or with a clear face covering if available. But how that's actually put into action in different NICUs depends on whether there's a single room design and whether that can be facilitated or not. So going back to our FICARE wave, this wave started 10 years ago. This was my son, he's now 18. I think this is probably when he was about 8 years of age. Our FICARE wave was a very small wave when it started, and now we've grown into a huge tsunami with different studies across the world looking at the importance of family integrated care. Here's one of my favorite slides of Fabiana Schuli, who was one of the leaders in family integrated care and actually stimulated me to look at this issue and supported our first studies in family integrated care. And here we are at our first family integrated care conference in Banff at the end of the cluster randomized control trial. We felt at that time that we had started a wave and that there was that point, we had already reached a point of no return with family integrated care. We cannot lose hope now, and we will continue to promote parental presence in the NICU. I have to say I'm reassured that the second wave of COVID has challenged our hospitals, that most hospitals have been much more careful about what they are doing with parents. And we hope that this will remain so going forward. We're going to try and get our statement on parental presence published in a medical journal hopefully in the next month or so. And that again will hope promote family integrated care. I love this hopeful sort of slide. This was I think our last trip before shutdown for COVID. When you're at the end of your rope, tie it and knot and hold on. I really think our family integrated care steering committees and our international collaborators and our parent collaborators need to continue to promote family integrated care despite the challenges of COVID. Again, thank you to the Canadian Premature Baby Foundation for promoting this, and I'd like to support them during World Prematurity Day, and please don't hesitate to donate and support Canadian Premature Baby Foundation over the next few days. And thank you to all my national, international collaborators for family integrated care studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. O'Brien, so much for your presentation. I always love to hear about FICARE, and obviously FICARE has changed my life. I was part of the research study at Sinai in 2012, and my son was admitted there, and I was part of that study, and it was absolutely life-changing for me. That changed my career, get involved with this community, because I really felt empowered and I was able to advocate for my son in numerous occasions. And that's what I now do at the foundation, because I felt that was my role as a parent to continue the work and collaborate with the FICARE team. So there's so many questions I have to ask you, Dr. O'Brien, because it is a very challenging time. And in the beginning of the pandemic, you were fearing that we were going back 20 years when there was no family-centered care and parents were still seen as visitors. And we still see how many papers they call us visitors. They put visiting hours, and this is absolutely devastating. I feel that we did go back. How can we now move forward, knowing what we know for COVID? the spread within babies in neonatal units, how can we move forward to make sure parents are still part of the care, is still part of the care team, and work together with hospital staff?
Fabienne, I think the policies that happened during COVID came out of the fear of staff, around the fear of spread of COVID in the NICU, probably from parents to staff. So I think one of the things that's really important is that parents know how to protect themselves at home in their transit to the hospital, so they're less likely to actually cause an infection to staff members in the NICU, or less likely to transfer the infection to their infant. One of the ways to do that is really to follow good public health guidelines. So parents of babies in NICU probably need to go over and above the usual practice. They need to really adhere, limit their exposures outside the hospital, try and keep their bubbles small, so they're less likely to cause an infection in staff, if that makes sense. The other thing is, I think parents can really lobby with their hospitals around making sure that they are provided with the proper masks to actually better support their presence in hospital. Again, I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. Do not hesitate to ask the NICU staff to appeal on your behalf to actually change the hospital policy. That's what we've had to do at Mount Sinai. But these policies are bred out of fear and lack of knowledge. And again, right now, I think people are even more fearful, because we know that 60% of transmission is happening probably from asymptomatic COVID patients, or people who are infected with COVID but are asymptomatic. So I think really the only way parents are going to be able to maintain their presence in the NICU is by not causing outbreaks, and by showing us that they can do that really well.
Absolutely. So I just want to say hello to a few people joining us here from Indonesia, Uganda, and Melinda Cruz from the Miracle Babies Foundation, Australia. Melinda is such an advocate for parental presence in NICU. I know she was also part of the FICARE study, and thank you all of you from watching us from all over the world. Dr. O'Brien, we have a comment here, actually a question. In an open bay NICU where babies are in a tight quarters, how can we try to ensure that parents can be in the unit together at the same time? So from the same person, Karen Beatty, hello Karen from Hamilton, Ontario. Can there be a discussion on circumstances where exceptions from policies about visitation by parents and siblings can be made? For example, palliation. Babies who have been in the unit for a long time, parents need each other.
Yeah, so I think you've probably put a few questions there together, Fabiana. Can you just go back to the first one? Sorry.
First question, in an open bay ICU where babies are in a tight quarters, how can we try to ensure that parents can be in the same unit together at the same time?
So I think I think we need to follow infection control guidelines. I think people need to wear a mask, and need to wear a mask properly. When they're with their baby in an open bay NICU. I think they need to try and stay 6 feet apart if possible, and the bed spaces need to be 6 feet apart. But other than that, parents should be able to be present with their masks in the NICU. When you look at when parents go to grocery stores or when parents go to other environments, and again, that's what needs to be there. So wearing masks and 6 feet possible away if possible. And I think just that's really what needs to happen. So it shouldn't prevent parents from being present. The guidelines need to be the regular public health guidelines. And similarly, if a nurse or more nurses are in that environment, again, trying to just maintain, wear a mask, wear it properly, and trying to stay distance from the parents if at all possible. Of course, when doing a transfer for skin to skin care or some of those things, you're going to be closer to parents. I think just trying to maintain your distance when at all possible and minimizing the very close time with families.
So
go ahead, Diana. I think the other question was around palliative care or having special guidelines around that. I think that's a really important piece of what needs to happen. And certainly we've been able to lobby at our hospital. I know across Canada, many sites have been able to lobby that where there is when it's end of life situation, that extended family should be able to come and visit. Again, I think that's going to be on a site-by-site and a patient-by-patient discussion. One of the ways we've been able to do it in our unit, and I know others, has been actually to have a single room that's actually where the patient can be moved, and that extended family can be invited into that room with the infant to facilitate greater visiting, greater number of people in the space at that time. However, again, it's the same issue around people need to be able to protect themselves when they're there. So even if grandparents are with parents or with extended family in an enclosed space, unless they're all living together in the one home, again, they need to wear masks when they come together and are in a small room together. So I think the second wave, I believe, is probably scarier than the first wave because we know more about the virus in some ways. I think we also know better how to protect ourselves. And I think the 3-level mask, as has been recommended by public health, is really important. Medical grade masks are perfect if we can supply those to families when they're in our environment. I think that's really important. And I think that's the way people need to protect themselves when they're in close quarters. What we do not want to happen, and I think nobody wants to happen, and this is why I think parents and families need to be brought into this discussion, is nobody wants our hospitals, our NICUs to have our nurses not turn up at work because they're sick or because they've been exposed. So I think all of us just need to work together. And that's why I believe it was really important to bring families into this discussion from the outset. Families need to know how to protect themselves at home and how to protect themselves on their way to the hospital and how to protect themselves in the hospital. That's a key piece.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about technology. You touched on technology. And earlier this year, CPBF, in collaboration with Pampers, we donate we gave grants to 8 hospitals across Canada to implement technology to keep parents and babies together. But it was never an idea to substitute parental presence, but really to enhance that piece between parents, especially with extended families or siblings when they are no longer able to come into the units. So how do you see technology playing a role in the NICU during the pandemic and beyond? Because now we know this is not a short-term thing as we thought in the beginning.
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece, Fabiana. So one of the things I try to emphasize in my presentation is the importance of parental presence. Parental presence is really important for the development of the newborn brain, and I think we cannot underestimate that. What technology does, though, is support the communication, particularly between staff and parents, and I think that's a key piece of this puzzle. Staff in some units are scared of being close to parents because they do not want to get infected. That is the fear of COVID, and I think that we have to recognize that. What technology does, though, is one, allow our staff to communicate more clearly with families. I think that's important. We have in our own NICU, we've had a lot of parents who actually attend rounds virtually. So they meet the whole 10-member team of rounds through an iPad. And I think parents have really gained confidence about what's going on in their baby's care, have had some sort of transparency in the discussion about their baby's care plan, and really do gain confidence in the knowledge of their baby and what's going on in their baby's care using that sort of technology. The other thing is that we can use the technology to actually help with that attachment piece between parents and infants. And I think that there probably can be further study done in that area. But for example, apps such as the vCreate app that's been used by the group in Glasgow, sending little short videos to families or sending messages to families is really important way of promoting parent-infant attachment. And I think that's another piece of this puzzle. But none of it replaces parental presence. And I don't want us to forget that parental presence is a different piece of this puzzle, and we need to continue to promote that despite COVID.
Absolutely. So early in the pandemic, we were discussing this augmented FI care. Can you share what is it?
So augmented FI care, this was a proposal that I wrote at the beginning of the pandemic in March, where I was really concerned that we were going to have a shortage of NICU neonatal nurses to take care of babies in the unit. Luckily, that hasn't happened so far. And I reached out to our colleagues in Winnipeg to see if they've had any challenge with nursing staff, or in Vancouver. And so far across the country, there has not been a challenge with the supply of nursing staff in NICUs, which I think is really a tribute to the nursing staff. The nursing staff have been protecting themselves. And I have to say, it's also a tribute to our parents, because our parents have not been a source of COVID outbreaks in our NICU today, which is fantastic. So but augmented FI care, the idea there was, in the case that we had a shortage of nurses, in our NICUs, whereas there was a subgroup of infants and a subgroup of parents who could actually take on even a greater role as almost nursing assistants in our NICUs, and making that a more clearly defined role. I still think there's a potential for that role. It may not be needed for COVID, but I'm not giving up on the idea, particularly for babies who have complex care needs and really just need parental care while in hospital. We may be able to create a slightly different environment for those families so they can provide greater care for their infant prior to discharge.
Absolutely. Dr. O'Brien, thank you so much for joining us here today. We have so much more to talk about, but unfortunately our time is up. But you're always welcome to come back to our Facebook Live. As you know, we do every Friday. So thank you, and I hope everything stays well during this new season, our winter season coming up soon, and the second wave of COVID. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Fabiana. Thank you, everybody.
And thank you all of you for joining the conversation today. We will have a short break and be back in 5 minutes with Dr. Nicole van Veenendaal from the Netherlands. And in honor of Prematurity Awareness Month, in collaboration with CPBF, Pampers will donate 200,000 diapers to support Canadian families and NICUs during November and December. Until the end of December, every time you use the hashtag Pampers for Preemies, Pampers will donate one extra diaper to Canadian ICUs through the CPBF. So join us. And I would like again to thank AbbVie and Pampers for supporting the Preemie Power Week. And I also want to thank the CPBF team who worked so hard preparing for this week. And CPBF is a registered charity, and your donations will go to our COVID care program to provide therapy sessions for NICU families. Please donate on our website, canadianpreemies.org. Together, we can create a brighter future for all NICU families. So next session will start in 3 minutes with Dr. Nicole van Veenendaal from the Netherlands. So stay with us. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today and welcome to the Preemie Power Week. I'm Fabiana Bacchini, Executive Director of the Canadian Premature Babies Foundation, CPBF, and your host for this event. The Preemie Power Week is the second of two international live series that CPBF is hosting in 2020 in recognition of World Prematurity Day. These education sessions are in collaboration with the International Family Integrated Care Committee, the Canadian Associations of Neonatal Nurses, EFCNI, and GLANS, the Global Alliance for the Newborn Care. For those not familiar with CPBF, we are a charitable organization, and our mission is to support and educate Canadian families of premature babies every step of the way. We believe that through consistent information, access to helpful resources, and peer support inside and outside the NICU, we can empower families, ensuring they are ready to care for their baby. Consistent information is especially important today when we are facing a global pandemic. With educational sessions like this, we intend to bring you the guidance of healthcare professionals and the knowledge gathered by researchers around the world. These are valuable tools to help our community raise awareness and advocate for the well-being of families and their babies. I would like to thank AbbVie for the unrestricted educational grant and Pampers for supporting the Preemie Power Week. And right now, I have here Dr. Nicole van Veenendaal from the Netherlands. She's going to talk about the Crown Initiative, creating room and opportunities on wards for newborn and their families. Dr. Nicole van Veenendaal will be presenting an European initiative on family integrated care with leading hospitals in the field of family integrated care, the Crown Initiative, creating room and opportunities on wards for newborns and their families. She'll be introducing the 4 C's for closeness, core components of FI care within neonatal settings. This can give an overview towards successful implementation of FI care independent of setting and resources. Dr. van Veenendaal works as a clinician scientist, PhD student, and epidemiologist in the Department of Neonatology in OLBG. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that.
It's good.
A large teaching hospital in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Her interests are within human development and neonatal care. She studies the impact of family integrated care on preterm infants and their parents, and has set up several studies and trials into this field of research. She works together with all stakeholders in neonatal care, including veteran parents, as a multidisciplinary healthcare professional team who are active contributors to her research. In the Department of Neonatology, she set up a family integrated care program for parents, nurses, and physicians. Dr. van Veenendaal, thank you so much for joining us here today. I know you are many hours ahead of us. It's the end of the day for you, so we are so grateful to have you sharing your knowledge, your experience, and expertise on family integrated care today. Thank you. I will let you share your screen, and at the end of the presentation, we can have a Q&A time.
Sure. So thank you so much, Fabiana, for these very kind words and inviting me to this great webinar. Indeed, it's almost 7 o'clock here in the Netherlands. And I'm very happy to present to you some of the findings of our Crown Initiative, which we set up together with parents and together with the EFCNI. So to start off, I'm in the Netherlands, so this is Europe. You probably know the Netherlands from their windmills, the beautiful tulips. It's too bad you can't visit now due to the COVID. So it's this small country. And I work in Amsterdam, which is famous for their canals. We have beautiful ice skating in the winter. And I work in the large city hospital, which looked like this approximately 100 years ago, the nurses and all the mothers and babies together. And as you might know, I am an epidemiologist trained, and I really love numbers. And I work at OVG, very good Fabiana, which is actually the Dutch saying for Our Lady Peace. Our Lady Peace Hospital. And we work there with family integrated care in single family rooms, but above we have a full integration of maternal and neonatal services. So here you can see one of the rooms, which is a neonatal room in which we can take care of the baby and parents can stay. But we don't only have neonatal rooms, we actually have dyad rooms, so for mother and infant care. We can provide antenatal care, labor, postnatal care, and neonatal care at all times for mothers and babies together. So we have approximately 53 rooms, and this is the floor plan. And one of the rooms in which we can take care of mother and baby looks like this. So here you have a mother who has just given birth, and next to it we have a baby, and father can be there as well. As long as mom needs medical care, she can stay with her baby, and the whole family stays together. Once mother gets better, they can move to smaller rooms as we don't need as much space for mothers. Here you see another floor plan with a room, and here's a lovely couple, a mom and a dad with their 26-weeker, who stayed in our facility for a long, long time, and they were eventually discharged home with tube feeding. And Noah now is 2 years of age and is doing really great. So we don't only have the architecture. I think that's not one of the main things that you should focus on when talking about family integrated care. As Karel told us, it's about parental presence. It's about having parent partnership. So here's one of a twin, also born at 26 weeks, with the mom and older sibling who can stay together. We do rounds with parents at all times. Nurses also attend. Parents support each other. They can meet with each other. We have educational sessions for parents and for staff. And we have 2 dedicated nurses that actually lead our FICARE program. So with this in the background, we were thinking about how are other hospitals actually delivering their maternal and newborn care. But most of all, we were interested in what do parents actually find is important when we talk about FICARE. So to answer this question, we teamed up with parents from our Dutch association, and we looked at the ESC&I standards, and we asked them, what do you think is most important? So 48 parents answered to us, 46 mothers mainly, and 97% is very keen and thinks the most important issue to explore is if they get separated from their infant. Other important issues they think is, are they able to room in? What can they do in care? Can they participate in medical rounds? And if they can perform kangaroo care. So parents actually put closeness at the center. However, the Netherlands is very small. We did a small pilot study going around our hospitals, but we were actually interested in the greater picture. So we used 19 parent-rated questions for interviews, which were semi-structured, and we asked leading centers in family-centered and integrated care in Europe on how they give their maternal and newborn services. We used the 4 pillars of FICARE, and above all, we did the qualitative analysis with parents together. So I teamed up with the mother of a 26-weeker who's actually also a scientist, and together we performed our qualitative analysis. So it started off with a snowball, and it became an avalanche. We interviewed 44 units in Europe and 1 unit in Canada. And as you can see, we have the Nordic countries, we have the southern countries, we even have low to middle income countries such as the Ukraine participating. And first I'll talk to you about the more numerical results. So we asked them if they had to separate mothers and infants during maternal and or newborn care. And what we found was that it is very, very common. Almost all units have to separate mother and infant during care, even in those units that are leading units in FICARE or family-centered care. Approximately 1/3 can implement family-centered rounds, which Karel already elaborated on. Approximately 1/3 had education sessions for parents, and just a little than half had education sessions for professionals in which they were educated on the importance of parental presence. So these were just the numerical data, but we were especially interested in factors for success. How do you actually achieve closeness in your unit? What are the burdens that you encounter? How can you make this a success within your unit? We did the analysis and we came up with these 4 factors. We have culture, collaboration, capacities, and coaching. And at the center there again is closeness. And I'll walk you through all the different factors for success. Let's start off with closeness and the culture around closeness. So culture is the jointly held characteristics, values, thinking, and behaviors of people in workplaces and organizations. As you have experienced your NICU or as a healthcare professional, you probably have a feeling of the culture of your unit. And so did our interviewees. They had some culture that was very natural. So one of the quotes was, "It's within the culture of the unit. The nurses are usually really upset if the parents are not there. They come to the doctor and complain. There are alarm clocks ringing if the parents are not there." But other units were very reluctant. They said, "I think staff don't want parents around because parents look on their hands." So if we go further from culture, we look at collaboration. And as you know, collaboration is the act of working together. It's either between staff and parents. And we had very interesting quotes. And this one is one that I really, really love. It's from a unit that told us that on the collaboration between staff and parents, it's kind of promoted that everybody has their own important role to play. Parents carry that 6th sense. But also, the act of working together or collaboration for closeness was very important on the staff level. And by that, I mean the staff level between different units. So it could be, as this one said, that they work together very good. So sometimes we have an agreement with the maternity ward that they come and supervise us and take care of the mother, and they can stay with their child. So actually, by working together between the different units, mother and her infant could be together and they did not have to be separated. And another one, especially important, is to regard family-centered rounds. So how is that working on those units? What are the thoughts and the themes that come up? So one of the units told us, "I think family-centered rounds are very wise. The parents could give us a lot of information about the infant." Again, kind of approaching that 6th sense. And other units had problems. So the parents cannot be in the unit because of confidentiality questions. So this can be an important issue, but also some of the units had solutions such as signing confidentiality agreements, putting on headphones for parents, trying to make it work. Then one of the important themes is capacities. So capacities are resources of supply or support, and they can either be physical, like equipment that's present in one ward or is not present on the other ward. It could be human, such as staffing, but they could also be around policies such as guidelines and logistics. So let's start off with physical. One of the main burdens around mother-infant closeness or parent-infant separation, whatever you want to name it, is this. Our maternity ward is in another building, obviously separating mothers and infants. But other units had different issues. So the other most common issue was space. The big difficulty for us is space. You know, we've got several babies in a room with lots of equipment, and it's very, very difficult. Other capacities were human capacities, such as staffing. And one of those interesting quotes was the following: "We don't like to give an intravenous catheter on the maternity ward, as it is a very busy ward. And if these nurses need to take care of these babies, then they don't take care of other babies. They do not have time to do everything." I think also nowadays that's a very relating quote that we could all relate to as healthcare professionals. So policies for parent-infant closeness included examples such as early discharge home programs for infants being discharged with tube feeding, and of course open access policies allowing parents to be there at all times, not considering them a visitor. And other capacities would be like free meals and free parking for parents so they could be able to be there. So the factors for success, the last one is coaching. And also Karel already touched upon this theme. So coaching is acquiring and transferring knowledge and skill. One of the centers, which were actually leading centers, talked about how they tried to coach their staff and how they tried to get them comfortable taking care of the other part of the diet, which is one of these quotes. So we've had this educational rotation. Our NICU nurses went to the prenatal and postnatal ward, and midwives were in our unit for periods. So this is part of coaching, but of course it's also part of collaborating and having an open culture, being open to other views and being able to work together. And the other one is, of course, about education to staff. So you need to provide education for staff because they support the families involved. That's a big part of what happens. When a new nurse starts in our unit, they are orientated in integrated care and coached by a parent. So this was the only unit that actually had reversed coaching by parents to staff. Some units, as I showed, approximately 1/3 had coaching from staff to parents. So whenever we look at these outcomes and whenever we look at closeness as a core component of family integrated care, we found 4 themes: the culture, and within that culture, the collaboration, coaching, and capacities. And again, this is not to replace the 4 pillars of FICARE, and definitely not. This is about the facilitators and barriers and the factors for success to keep families close in the unit. And again, that really touches what Karel was talking about parental presence being, we cannot change that with anything else but the parent. So in conclusion, mother-infant separation during periods of neonatal or maternal care is very, very common. And if we can focus on those 4 C's of closeness, we can actually have better FICARE practices in our units. Let me see. Fabiana, I think I'm ready.
Thank you, Dr. Van Veenendaal. What a great presentation. Thank you so much for sharing with us and for really shine a light in what is happening in your unit. I'm hoping many others can follow. So congratulations for this great initiative. So my first question is, what happened with this model during the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a great question. So please keep in mind that we are Dutch and very stubborn. And within our unit, we actually challenged our hospital management, who were actually keen on restricting parental presence, as we have had very much experience now with the irreplaceable role parents have during hospital stay of their infant. We just said no. Parents should be here. They are key to infant development. We're not going to restrict parental presence in our unit. But we were very fortunate that we have, of course, single family rooms for everybody. So that's, of course, one of the issues that others might have, which made it easier for us. And of course, within our FICARE program, we did have some difficulties because we could not have the educational sessions together with the parents together in rooms. So we're still looking for digital alternatives. And we had to close off the common areas where parents could be together, again, because of the social distancing regulations.
So how about siblings? Or siblings is still unable to come inside the units, or they were not allowed to come?
Yes, they were allowed to come, but again, they had to adhere to physical distancing as well.
So parents, do they get screened every day when they come to the hospital? How is those protocols?
No, they're not screened, but whenever they have symptoms, they should be screened per local policy of our city, and then we ask them to self-quarantine. Yeah.
So I have a question coming here in regards of the statistics we presented. Was there a mix and match as to what sites were doing what, or were there certain sites that were doing all?
Oh, so considering the sites that I was interviewing?
Yeah.
So it was very mixed. I did not look at it from that perspective because you were really looking at facilitators and barriers for keeping mothers and infants together. And if you would have to make a matrix of all the different interventions that were implemented, just as Karel told, you have parent-delivered interventions, you have parent-partner models of care, you would get an exuberant and large matrix, not telling us a lot of more information. So, no.
So for hospitals that don't have single rooms, what are your recommendations from your perspective? How can they still keep families together during this time using this model of care?
Yeah, so as also Karel pointed out, I think it's all about partnership. I think it's about having no hierarchy between staff and parents and staff, how do you say that correctly? Acknowledging parents in their irreplaceable role and that they are actually healing to the infants. They actually have a healing and very important role to play in the treatment of the babies we are caring for in the NICU. But of course, I think, as Karel also told everybody, you have to adhere to local infection control measures. So using face masks is, of course, very, very important. Keeping physical distances is very important. I'm not saying you should not do that, but I think you should have an open dialogue between the staff and parents and try to shift the culture towards where it's normal for parents to be there.
Absolutely. So you were one of the key players on the position statement to come up with the position statement with all those incredible points that Karel O'Brien just shared with us. How do you feel as a healthcare professional and a fierce advocate for parents to hear what is happening around the world? And we know that a lot of hospitals in Europe have visiting times in the beginning of the pandemic, and there was a lot of advocacy to change a little bit how things are right now. It's still in Canada, we have 2 parents, but no siblings. In some hospitals, it's 1 parent at a time, not together. So how do you feel about that?
I think it's heartbreaking. actually. If I think of how far we've come together and now we are going back 50 years, I think it's heartbreaking. That's my first feeling about it, but I think we should move forward and again look at the possibilities that are there. And I think that the COVID pandemic is actually showing us how important it is to be compassionate, for families to be together, not only in neonatal care. I mean, you see all these heartbreaking television fragments of elderly people not being able to be with their families. I mean, why should that be different from babies? I mean, they should also be together with their families. So, yes, that's my personal opinion.
So how do you see the healthcare system moving forward with families integrating the care of the babies in the NICU after the pandemic?
That's a good question. So I hope that we actually learn from what's happening now and that we can open up dialogue between parents and professionals, that we can see how important they are, the parents, and how we really need them in the NICU. I mean, it's not that they're there and that they're a burden. No, they are there because they have their infant there, it's their family, they need to take care of it. I mean, it's more than normal that they should be there. And they're not a burden. And I hope people see that and that we can move forward from there.
Absolutely. Dr. Van Veenendaal, any final thoughts before we close your session today?
Any final thoughts? I hope that people see the importance of parent partnership in neonatal care and that we can move forward together. I think that's one of the most important issues to explore and to maintain.
Absolutely. We have a comment here from Monica Virges. She runs a parent organization in Madrid, Spain. It's an excellent situation in the Netherlands. Dr. Nicole, thank you. So absolutely, I think this is from all of us, parent organizations from all over the world, to congratulate you on this initiative and your advocacy to keep parents together with their babies during the pandemic and beyond. And I hope that we can really work together in more collaborations to keep this going and see this in many more units around the world. So thank you so much for today. I appreciate all the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And thank you all of you for joining us here today. This is such an important conversation. It is World Prematurity Day tomorrow, and we have to keep advocating for families and babies to stay together. Coming up next, I have Dr. Linda Frank joining us from San Francisco, California, to talk about a survey that she did with parents to understand their experience during this time. We're going to get her started at 1:20 in 10 minutes from now. And in honor of Prematurity Awareness Month, in collaboration with CPBF, Pampers will donate 200,000 diapers to support Canadian families and NICUs during November and December. Until the end of December, every time you use the hashtag Pampers for Preemies, Pampers will donate one extra diaper to Canadian ICUs through the CPBF. So join us on that. And I also would like to thank AbbVie and Pampers for supporting the Preemie Power Week. And I also want to thank the CPBF team for the amazing work they did to put this week together for us. And CPBF is a registered charity, and your donations this week will go to our COVID care program to provide therapy sessions for families in the NICU and a year post-discharge. Please donate on our website, canadianpreemies.org. Together, we can create a brighter future for all NICU families. So our next session is going to start in 9 minutes with Dr. Linda Frank from San Francisco. I see you shortly. Welcome to the Preemie Power Week. If this is your first session of the day, I'm Fabiana Bacchini, Executive Director of the Canadian Premature Babies Foundation, CPBF, and your host for this event. The Preemie Power Week is the second of two international live series that CPBF is hosting 2020 in recognition of World Prematurity Day. These education sessions are in collaboration with the International Family Integrated Care Committee, the Canadian Association of Neonatal Nurses, CAN, EFCNI, and GLANCE, the Global Alliance for the Newborn Care. For those not familiar with CPBF, we are a charitable organization, and our mission is to support and educate Canadian families of premature babies every step of the way. We believe that through consistent information, access to helpful resources, and peer support inside and outside the NICU, we can empower families, ensuring they are ready to care for their baby. Consistent information is especially important today when we are facing a global pandemic. With educational sessions like this, we intend to bring you the guidance of healthcare professionals and the knowledge gathered by researchers around the world. These are valuable tools to help our community raise awareness and advocate for the well-being of families and their babies. I would like to thank AbbVie for the unrestricted educational grant and Pampers for supporting the Preemie Power Week. And right now we're going to talk about the worldwide impact of COVID-19 on patient and family-centered care. Dr. Frank will share findings from an international survey of changes to hospital policies and practice regarding patient and family-centered care during the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, and how hospitals engaged patient and family advisors in planning and implementing changes. Dr. and Professor Linda Frank holds the Jack and Elaine Cohen Endowed Chair in the Pediatric Nursing at the University of California, San Francisco, UCSF School of Nursing. She has extensive clinical research and academic experience in maternal, newborn, child, and adolescent healthcare, with a particular emphasis on improving patient and family partner healthcare delivery and research. From 2015 and 2020, she served as co-principal investigator and director of postnatal research for the UCSF Preterm Birth Initiative. In 2020, she was inducted into the Sigma Nursing Researcher Hall of Fame and named the UCSF School of Nursing Research Mentor of the Year. Dr. Linda Frank, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations. It's so well deserved. Your work is phenomenal, and I'm so happy to bring you to share your knowledge and expertise with our community.
Thank you so much, Fabiana, and thank you to the Canadian Premature Baby Foundation for this opportunity to share some new research on the COVID-19 pandemic and impact on family-centered care. Let me go ahead and share my slides with you.
Absolutely, and we're just going to remind everyone watching us that we are having a Q&A time after your presentation. So you can send your questions and on the comments below.
Wonderful. So before I begin my remarks, I just want to acknowledge and thank the fantastic team who worked with me to complete this rapid research. Research doesn't happen just one person. So it was a large team effort with collaboration from colleagues at the Institute for Patient and Family-Centered Care, from the University of California, San Francisco, and the University of Washington. And we were supported by the UCSF Preterm Birth Initiative communications team. In the brief time we have, I'd like to review with you what we know about care and pandemics, and share data on how hospitals have responded to the current COVID-19 crisis, and then discuss some evidence-based approaches to protecting patients, families, staff, and to preserving family-centered care. This slide will be a review for most people listening to this session, but it bears reminding ourselves of the core concepts of family-centered care. Dignity and respect, where families' knowledge, values, beliefs, and cultural backgrounds are incorporated into the planning and delivery of care. Information sharing, where families receive timely, complete, accurate information so that they can effectively participate in care and decision-making. Participation, where families are encouraged and supported in participating in care decisions and at the level that they choose. And finally, collaboration, where families, health practitioners, and healthcare leaders collaborate in all aspects of healthcare, including policy, implementation, research design, education, and more. Now, concerns about hospital provision of family-centered care during a global crisis are not new. In Liz Crocker and Bev Johnson's book, Privileged Presence, they describe the negative impacts of the 2002 to 2004 SARS epidemic on family-centered care, that we must pay attention to the side effects of separation of families from patients. IPFCC also published a white paper in 2010 with lessons learned from the SARS-1 and outlining steps that healthcare organizations should take in planning for the pandemic. They advise that it's important to take steps to contain the illness and to remember that family members are stewards of patient safety and integral to a patient's well-being. However, not everyone has listened. For example, when the first COVID surge hit the US in the spring of 2020, hospitals such as a major New York academic medical closed their doors to all family and support persons in the name of safety. In this instance, a national outcry followed on social media and press, and about 2 weeks later, the New York governor issued a reversal of policy. A month later, WHO clarified their guidance specific to newborn care and recommending to protect practices of skin-to-skin contact and breastfeeding. Then other groups like the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health, and the British Association of Perinatal Medicine, to name just a few, all followed suit, recommending non-separation of newborns and mothers in all but the most extreme circumstances. Parent advocacy organizations have also been very vocal about the harm being done, treating parents of newborns as visitors banned from hospitals. But concern about overly restrictive hospital policies have persisted, and we've heard many stories from around the world of parents being unnecessarily separated from their newborns because of fears about the COVID-19 transmission. But it's hard to combat misinformation or promote best practices when so little information is available about what is happening on the front lines. So my colleagues and I quickly designed a survey to gather information about family presence in hospitals and to learn how hospitals were partnering with patients and families in changing and implementing new policies. Our methods were simple, an online survey posted from May 8th through July 31st. We conducted outreach via websites, professional groups, and targeted emails to hospital contacts. Respondents could report on hospital-wide policies and practices or for specific patient care settings. I'd like to share some of these results with you now so that you can use the findings to prevent further collateral damage to family-centered care in your settings. So what did we find? By the closing date, we received responses from 541 individuals representing a range of roles within 394 unique hospitals and health systems and 35 countries, although the majority were from North America. Almost all the respondents reported hospital policy changes that limited the presence of family or support persons due to COVID-19. We asked how many support persons were permitted at a patient's bedside by setting. As you can see, most of the adult settings were not permitting any support persons to accompany patients. The maternity care and pediatric settings predominantly allowed one support person with the patient, and some of the neonatal and pediatric settings permitted two support persons. We also asked how patient and family advisory councils, or PFACs, or patient and family advisors were involved in the COVID-19 policy changes. Respondents reported a low level of involvement, with around 20% involving them in planning and communication activities. Now let's take a closer look at selected responses from the neonatal and pediatric settings. In this question, we asked how COVID-19 policy changes impacted the 4 domains of patient and family care. You can see that just about 20% of the units reported negative effects of the COVID-19 policies on their ability to provide respectful and dignified care, and reported it was improved, whereas 40% said that the policies had negatively affected information sharing. The majority of units reported negative impact on patient and family participation in care planning and on patient and family support related to the COVID-19 policy changes. There were some small differences in the proportions across the pediatric settings, but they may not be significant. We asked if common interactions between the clinical care team and families had changed because of COVID-19 policies, and indeed they had. The most common being in medical rounds and transition planning. It's quite a bit more difficult to practice shared decision-making or transition planning if families aren't able to be present. We also asked a specific question about the impact on healthcare disparities, and here you can see that 50% of the NICUs and PICUs reported a negative impact. This was in contrast to the pediatric units. We also asked a series of questions about what had been put in place to support family members during the pandemics. For those whose families members were permitted to be present, most of the sites, but by no means all, provided personal protective equipment or PPE. About half or less provided access to free meals or subsidized meals, transportation, or overnight accommodation. But the number of NICUs providing these services was notably less than the other pediatric settings. We must ask ourselves and our hospital administrator colleagues why this must be so, when the need for proper nutrition and proximity to the infant is essential for breastfeeding, for example. Notably, mental health services were more often available for NICU support persons, but the numbers of sites reporting this were small. For family members who were not permitted or who weren't able to be with their baby, about 60% of the sites encouraged the use of technology. About a offered or encouraged the use of specific software or apps with access to support staff, such as a family liaison. Fewer loaned devices to families, and only a few provided guidance on how to keep devices clean. This was a surprise. Again, there were only small differences in access to these supports by unit type. Additionally, family members who were not permitted or who weren't able to be with their child were offered the possibility of participating remotely in rounds in about 30% of, they were not permitted to participate in rounds. In about 50% of the PICUs and 60% of the NICUs and PICUs also made daily calls to non-present parents. Fewer sites provided the option of remote family meetings or assisted in helping families with access to video calls with their ill child or parent. And again, mental health services were rarely provided. In summary, this very brief snapshot of the first wave of the COVID-19 hospital policy impact on family-centered care shows that hospital leaders and care providers believe that family-centered care has been negatively impacted. And for neonatal and pediatric units, the impact has been most profound in reducing family support and participation in care planning and in widening disparities in care. We found substantial variation in policy and practice across settings and variable efforts to mitigate the impact of the restrictions. And disappointingly, patient and family advisors have played a very small role in hospital policy change and in communication. Now, I just want to share with you another new study that includes 4 NICUs in the UK and 2 in the US that documents the impact of COVID-19 related restrictions on family presence on parents of sick newborns. This chart shows the impact on key aspects of parental involvement based on the approach to the restricted access. Overall, having one parent with unrestricted access had slightly less impact than the other approaches. However, the engagement of the other partner suffered even with this approach. Unfortunately, the study does not provide any data on the effectiveness of the restrictions. So were there any exposures caused by maintaining parental contact, or prevented by the differential restrictions. We don't know this. And this crucial data is needed if science-based rather than fear-based policies. This slide shows a couple of the quotes from the parents who were restricted from being with their babies. I think these quotes capture the impact much better than the numbers do. One parent said, "It felt like my baby was not mine and I was asking permission from the nurses. Also, it has made me feel resentful towards my husband as the emotional burden of a child in the NICU fell upon myself." Another parent said, "I will remember this for the rest of my life. I will also remember the kindness of the staff, but at 18 hours old, I was told my baby might die and I had to beg to see him because I'd already had my 2 hours. How is that okay?" I think we have to ask ourselves, how is that okay? Although the results of our survey or the survey from the UK that I just shared with you may not surprise you, they are a call to action. Your powerful voices are needed to advocate for more rational health promoting policies, and I hope you'll visit our website and review these initial results in more detail and use them as motivation to re-examine your own policies and practices. We have posted a link to register your unit or your hospital to take part in future surveys and interviews, and I hope you'll help us share this link widely and help recruit many more units and hospitals to register and participate. It's clear that the response to the COVID-19 pandemic so far has been fear-based, creating false choices between the best interests of the population and of individual families and family-centered care, treating families as members as visitors against which staff need to be protected. A more rational or evidence-based approach to the pandemic calls for families to be included as allies and partners in caregiving, provided with education, support and PPE, just like staff, treated as respected members of the healthcare team who provide essential emotional and physical support to patients, and recognized for their contributions that they make to patient and staff safety, as well as emotional well-being. As Dr. Martha Curley and colleagues have stated, infection control, public health concerns, and family-centered care can coexist. As the pandemic continues, we must update policies to ensure that hospitals and units practice shared decision-making for every aspect of care and in determining the necessary restrictions, and that they increase support to mitigate the stress contagion for families and healthcare professionals. If we fully accept that there should be zero separation between infants and parents, then we can put our collective energies to finding effective solutions. For example, creative use of space and transitioning members of the healthcare team to remote working via technology so that we can preserve the parental presence with the babies while lowering the overall occupancy and traffic through the neonatal unit. Using technology to support the connection and developmental care, such as in the middle photo, this Zoom music therapy class, where babies get to see an unmasked face over the Zoom, and the parent is at the bedside being guided by the remote music therapist in developmentally supportive activities with their baby. And then, as shown in the last panel, providing and investing in education and support for parents so that they have the knowledge and skills to be true partners in infection control and safety. On this slide, I have listed some sites to watch for up-to-date guidance on family-centered care as the pandemic evolves. COVID-19 pandemic has caused much direct suffering. It's also resulted in disruption of the global economy and a chain reaction of adverse effects, particularly for more vulnerable populations. It's easy to get discouraged by the enormity of the devastation caused by the virus. But let's not cause more collateral damage by giving up hard-won progress in humane, science-based way of delivering healthcare, family-centered care. In fact, we should be doubling down on what we know works. Families are not the virus or to be feared in the fight against the virus. Families are working together. We can, with families, we can help protect vulnerable children and staff from the virus. Families are a shield and a protection that we must really employ. Let's work creatively together with families towards our common goal of safety and quality of neonatal care. Thanks for listening.
Wow, Dr. Frank, thank you so much for this presentation. It is absolutely heartbreaking to hear, to see the numbers, to hear the stories, to read the quotes. And right after your talk, I have a mother who actually experienced the NICU in the very beginning of the pandemic, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. And when I talked to her the first time, I actually cried because I could not put myself in her shoes to imagine what that looks like, to be away from your family for so long, and you had to make a choice between your husband, your other children, and your baby in the NICU. So thank you for the work that you're doing. I really hope this will shine a light in many hospitals to look into their policies and protocols now that we are right in the second wave of this pandemic. So my first question to you is, how do you see FICare or family-centered care moving forward?
Thank you, Fabienne. If I had a magic wand, I would wave it and make sure that I think at the very least that patients and families are involved in decision-making around restrictions and in policies and in communication around policies. I think that's the very least we can do. Many hospitals made huge progress over the last decade in engaging families, not just in the care of their loved one, but in the operations of the hospital and advising on all hospital policies and practices. And I think that is something that's easily maintained. It can be done virtually, it can be done, asynchronously. And so I think at the very least, we must engage families in decision-making and in planning around the response to the pandemic. Beyond that and alongside that, I think we must preserve and fight for zero separation of infants and newborns and children and their parents. And I think that is hopefully, I caught the end of Nicole's talk, and she mentioned about how, maybe because of this, we come out stronger in recognizing the importance now that we've had a period where, unfortunately, there have been some, receding of the progress that has been made. It will help us recognize how critical it is, and we will return to those practices with even more commitment.
So my question to you is: are we taking notes of the situation, happening with families not being included, family advisors not being heard? Because as you mentioned, there was papers published from SARS pandemic, lessons learned, how can we prepare for the next pandemic? And obviously that did not happen. Are we learning lessons now as a healthcare system worldwide to not to see this happening again?
I think that is critical, and this is an area where we can all participate. We must gather the data around the impact, what collateral damage is happening, what are the adverse effects. We must all contribute. So I encourage hospital members listening to these presentations to join our survey so that we can create a registry of hospital practices and policies. I know there are efforts where parent advocacy groups, I believe led by the EFCNI, and I know Canadian Premature Baby Foundation is a huge collaborator in collecting parent stories and data from parents directly around the impact on them. So I encourage everyone to join together to help make this visible. What's not measured does not get seen. And so we need to measure and share the effects that we're seeing and make sure that they are looked at with equal weight as we look at the restrictive policies.
Absolutely. So I want to share with you that last week, one of the family advisors here in Canada called me, and she was in absolute tears that families, only one parent has been allowed in her unit to stay with the baby. And even in times of palliative care, the parents could not be together in that moment. So how can we, in the middle of this pandemic where the protocols are still in place, the restrictions are still in place, can you possibly convince or show the numbers, show what is happening to change some policies, or at least have some compassion in moments of life and death? to make that situation a little bit different for families?
Yeah, I think and maybe, collaborating beyond our usual networks to talk with others who have been successful in creating large scale change or in marketing, for example, to really, again, we have to deal with the fear that is in the population, the fear that is in hospital administrators, and help them see that families are allies and not to be feared, that they are there to help and protect, and that they have the same goals. Some of this is very difficult to do in the middle of a crisis, but I think there are techniques that we can learn from other examples and in other settings. I think one, you mentioned compassion. Compassion is really important, and figuring out processes where there can be compassionate exceptions if people are not willing to make larger scale changes on the rules as a whole, and our negotiation skills. I think we have to, continue to hone them. So reaching out beyond our usual networks to get allies in this fight.
Absolutely. And there are so many people around the world right now advocating, and together we can certainly be stronger and raise the voices of these very vulnerable families. So we have a few comments here I want to share with you. Dr. Karel O'Brien said she loved the quote, "The family is not the virus." We have a comment from Monica Virtus, who runs a parent organization in Madrid, Spain. Very nice presentation, Dr. Frank. Parent and families are so important. We also have a viewer from Kamloops in BC who wants to have access to a presentation after. We will have the presentations available on our YouTube channel and website very shortly. So I want to ask about technology, because obviously you're from San Francisco. First time I went to your hospital, it was the first time I saw Zoom 3 years ago. And you're always ahead of the game in technology. But many other hospitals are still implementing technology. It's new. During the pandemic, there was this rush to get technology into the ICU. And you really, you pointed out that it's not to substitute parents. It's really to enhance, and how else can we connect the families and use the technology in that way to enhance that connectivity. So I want you to leave this message very, very clear for all the hospitals who are implementing technology, that this is not an or thing, but it's an and thing.
Yes, well, I think you said it well, but I'll just say it again for reinforcement, that that having a parent being connected virtually is not the same as having them in the unit providing skin-to-skin care, breastfeeding support, emotional support, developmental care with their infant. So it's not the same, but it can be used to enhance. And for example, where we're not able to make progress with both parents being with the baby, perhaps making sure that the second parent or partner, a support person, is able to attend rounds, for example, and hear about the care decisions being made and have input into those in real time. So I think remote access with technology for engaging with the healthcare team around decision making is, a wonderful enhancement. And I think one of the, if small silver linings of the pandemics is the liberalization of use of technology, and so that we can increase access for parents who had difficult access for things like rounds. And I think the developmental care and the ability for babies, particularly the older babies who are in the unit for many, many months, say over 4 months old up to a year old, and children on pediatric wards, the young children, being able to see an unmasked face more often, even if it's through video, might be something that is beneficial. Being able to have the staff remotely, for example, the therapist and other people who can coach and help support parents. So preserving the space at the bedside for the parent, and having the staff who are the teachers and coaches be the remote person guiding the parent in the interaction with their baby. Those, I think, are some of the creative and important uses of technology. But it is not, as you said, a substitute for parental presence and participation in the infant's care.
Absolutely. Are we going to do a follow-up survey next spring?
We are going to do a follow-up survey as soon as we can figure out how to organize ourselves and get some funding. But yes, we will hopefully do that at least by next spring. So I encourage everyone to go to our website and register your interest. Unfortunately, there are no, accurate lists of hospital NICUs and units and contact people for us to easily send out the surveys to and make sure we have good representation. So we're counting on you to sign yourselves up, and so that we have you on our list, and we will, as soon as we can, try to update the data and see how the practices are changing and trending, and post that information publicly so you can continue to use it for your own advocacy efforts. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Linda Frank, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm so grateful to have you sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today. Thank you.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and thank you everyone for all that you do, especially Fabiana and the Canadian Premature Baby Foundation.
Thank
We're
you,
grateful.
Dr.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
And thank you all of you for joining us here today. I will be back in about 5 minutes with a very important conversation. We talked with 3 different healthcare professionals, and now we're going to talk to an NICU parent who was in the NICU with her baby in the very first days of the pandemic, sharing her story and her experience. And in honor of Prematurity Awareness Month, in collaboration with CPBF, Pampers will donate 200,000 diapers to support Canadian families and NICUs during November and December. Until the end of December, every time you use the hashtag Pampers for Preemies, Pampers will donate 1 extra diaper to Canadian ICUs through the CPBF. So join us. And I would like once again to thank AbbVie and Pampers for supporting the Preemie Power Week, and also our great team here at CPBF. And we are a registered charity, and your donations this week will go to our COVID care program to provide therapy sessions for NICU families. Please donate on our website, canadianpreemies.org. Together, we can create a brighter future for all NICU families. So our next session is going to start in about 3 minutes with Lori Romas, this amazing mom from Northern Ontario. Stay tuned. Hello, everyone. If you're joining us now, this is our 4th session of the day, and perhaps the most important one, as you're going to be talking to a parent. I want to welcome you all to the Preemie Power Week. I'm Fabiana Bacchini, Executive Director of the Canadian Premature Babies Foundation, CPBF, and your host for this event. The Preemie Power Week is the second of 2 international live series that CPBF is hosting 2020 in recognition of World Prematurity Day. These education sessions are in collaboration with the International Family Integrated Care Committee, the Canadian Association of Neonatal Nurses, EFCNI, and GLANS, the Global Alliance for the Newborn Care. For those not familiar with CPBF, we are a charitable organization, and our mission is to support and educate Canadian families of premature babies every step of the way. We believe that through consistent information, access to helpful resources, and peer support inside and outside the NICU, we can empower families, ensuring they are ready to care for their baby. Consistent information is especially important today when we are facing a global pandemic. With educational sessions like this, we intend to bring you the guidance of healthcare professionals and the knowledge gathered by researchers around the world. These are valuable tools to help our community raise awareness and advocate for the well-being of families and their babies. I would like to thank AbbVie for the unrestricted educational grant and Pampers for supporting the Preemie Power Week. And right now, we talked to 3 healthcare professionals, and we felt their passion, their advocacy to keep families together during the pandemic and beyond. They are working fiercely around the world to change the situation for parents in many NICUs around the globe. And right here, we're going to talk about a parent experience in the NICU during the pandemic. Lori Romas, Preemie parent, talking about her family journey in the NICU at the beginning of the pandemic. She was transferred to another province, separated from her baby, and forced to cope alone. Out-of-province protocol prevented Lori from seeing her husband and other children. She was stranded a few hours from home with only her purse and winter mukluks, forced to choose between staying with her new infant or leaving him behind to return home. Lori, thank you so much for joining us here today. I know it's a roller coaster being out of the NICU for only 5 months. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join us here today to really share your story and bring the numbers and the result of those surveys to life. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me today.
So, Lori, let's start from the beginning. How did you end up in NICU? You had already 4 kids at home, all term babies, and then all of a sudden you are in the NICU. How did that happen?
Well, that's the interesting start of our tale. I actually work in our small community hospital in Kenora, Ontario, and I'll call it mother's intuition that brought me into hospital. I just wasn't feeling the baby kick. It wasn't a high-risk pregnancy. I was about 32 weeks along, had been working at our hospital till this point, and all evening I just had this nagging feeling that something was wrong. I wasn't feeling baby kick. So I couldn't go to sleep that night. Around 3:30 in the morning, I decided I would phone the hospital that I worked at just to get a bit of reassurance. I phoned in, and it was one of the maternity nurses that I knew quite well, who had been there for one of my other babies. And she said, "You've got to come in. We've got to check this out. Don't be embarrassed." So I told my husband, I said, "I'm just being anxious. It's no big deal, but I need to go into the hospital just to reassure myself." I said, "Don't bother coming. I've got this." So I drove myself to the hospital, or where I work, and they hooked me up to the monitors. And at first, everything was fine. Everything was really reassuring, other than I wasn't feeling baby. And all of a sudden, the heart rate started to dip really low. I saw the change in my nurse's face, and I knew it was serious. She said, "We'll be calling in the doctor." It's a small town, so we don't have obstetricians. She phoned in my family doctor, who is also a coworker of mine, and he came in pretty quickly. And he told me, "We're going to have to do a C-section." And I kind of said, "Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, yeah." And he said, "Now." And that's when it became kind of real. So I phoned my husband and I told him what was happening. It also happened to be our oldest child's 17th birthday. She was still at home sleeping. So there I was at hospital, 32 weeks along, going in for an emergency C-section. My family doctor was quite frank with me. He said, "We don't have time to transfer you. We're doing this here. I haven't done a section this early before. Baby's either going to come out crying or he won't." I didn't know if I was having a girl or a boy. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I was rushed into the operating room. It was so reassuring being surrounded by familiar eyes. This was when the masks all started for me in my operation. But all my concerned coworkers were right there. My doctor had phoned in the NICU team from Winnipeg who were flying to Kenora to pick up the baby. It was a successful delivery. I heard my baby cry. They announced, "You have a boy," and he was whisked away from me immediately. I didn't get to see him. They stapled me up and got me stable again. I quickly got to lay eyes on my son, Scott, and my husband quickly did as well. Before I was transferred by land ambulance and Scott was taken, he was flown to Winnipeg, where we were hopefully going to meet up again. So I was loaded into the ambulance. Scott was flown by an airplane, and we were on the road headed to Winnipeg. And when I got there, that's when the chaos started.
Lauren, just to give people a little bit of perspective, that was March 27. That was 1 week and a half into the global pandemic, right? It was right in the beginning. And just to give people an idea, you were very north of Ontario, closer to the border of Manitoba. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, we're about a half-hour drive from the Manitoba border. We're about a 2.5-hour drive into Winnipeg. But we are Northern Ontario still. We're Winnipeg's cottage country. Our small town has a population of about 15,000 and balloons to over 60,000 with the Manitoba tourists. So
that was your closest option to be transferred, wasn't South Ontario. Just give people a perspective of where we were physically located. That was what the choice to cross the border. And that time the borders were closed between Ontario and Manitoba. So tell us what happened with that transfer when you got to Manitoba. What happened?
Well, you're right. It's the closest center, and where we are in Ontario, Winnipeg is actually our catchment area for high-risk pregnancy, pediatrics, and obstetrics. I had my daughter up to Children's Hospital in Winnipeg less than 2 weeks before for an appointment. We had gone there quite regularly. However, when I got to the hospital in Winnipeg, we weren't allowed in the emergency door. So they unloaded me a second time at the cancer care door. We weren't allowed in the cancer care door. So I got unloaded a third time at the main entrance of the hospital. There were people smoking outside. A kind smoker opened the door so we could be wheeled in the stretcher. The ambulance attendants actually lied to get me into the hospital. They said, no, we hadn't been out of Manitoba in the last 2 weeks. Obviously, we had just come from Ontario, but they didn't know what to do either. And they did get me in and brought me up to a room where I was basically left and told, we'll give you an update at some point.
Right, and then your husband didn't come with you. You're by yourself. So once you stay in the hospital for a few days, what happened next?
Okay, yeah, my husband couldn't come. My family couldn't come. I was basically treated like I was an active COVID patient from where I came from, being out of province. It didn't matter that I had passed our work screening tool for 2 weeks and worked in an Ontario hospital, had no travel history, had no symptoms. We were labeled as active COVID patients. So I was isolated in a maternity room on Ward E, and Scott was isolated in the NICU. When I came to hospital, there was a delay in seeing him because infectious control had to clear us both. So although we were both at the hospital at the same time, it was hours before I could be cleared to go to the NICU.
So when you told me before that you could hold him many, many hours later with a lot of scrubbing on your chest and gloves, and tell us about that experience, Lori. Certainly not what you expected.
This was the farthest thing from what I expected from my pregnancy. It was like a movie. I couldn't have imagined this if I had tried. To leave my room, I had to put on a bright yellow gown, one of their isolation gowns. I had to wear a face mask. On top of that face mask, I had to put on a face shield, and I had to put on gloves. I couldn't go through the regular entrance to the NICU. I had to go through a back entrance. I had to get buzzed through several doors and relied on staff to do that for me. And then basically had to stand at the back entrance to their isolation room until the nurse was free to let me in. Once in, I had to change all of my gear. And when Scott was about 16 hours old, I was told I was allowed to hold him, do kangaroo care, I should clarify. To do this, I had to strip off all my isolation gear, basically be left standing in my fancy hospital mesh panties at the sink, to be scrubbed down thoroughly, my chest and my nipples, so I was safe to have my baby laid on me. I still required the full face shield, the mask, the gloves, the gown, but he got to lay on my chest, and all of a sudden it felt like it was real, like I truly did have a baby. And it was a great feeling, but it was so scary and very, very lonely.
We cannot even imagine what you went through, because the first time you shared your story with me, both of us were in tears just to imagine what it is and believe that experience for you. So we're very grateful to have you sharing this with us here today. But I also know that you're in a center that is very, very supportive of kangaroo care, and I'm very grateful to them that they make that happen for you, even in that very extreme circumstance right at the beginning of the pandemic. But Lori, after your first week, how was the NICU stay? Because the first week was like obviously fresh C-section, moving from place to place, far away from your family. And then did you settle? How did you settle? And did you get any support in the NICU while you were there?
I consider myself really lucky that I work in a hospital setting, so I did know to ask for a social worker while I was admitted to the hospital. They were working remotely at the time, but the social worker felt that she could come in for my case. There wasn't a lot of options. All the Ronald McDonald houses were closed. I basically was left without a support system. I wasn't planning on coming to Winnipeg. I had a purse and mucklucks and a hoodie. I don't even know where my pants went. But yeah, it was chaos. My younger sister, who lives in a town a few hours away from me, was able to get a hold of a connection she had in Winnipeg, who brought some clothes to the hospital for me. Because my family was not allowed to come up whatsoever. And I was told if I was in contact with anyone from Ontario, I wouldn't be allowed back in the NICU. I was really grateful for my family, because my family, although they weren't close, my parents and my sister found an Airbnb close to the hospital where I could stay, and I'd be able to walk back and forth to visit. I don't think I would have had the mind to be able to do those simple tasks at that time. The nurses were very supportive of me. They were advocating on my behalf and kind of saying, this is when we're doing here. This policy needs to change. When once I was settled in the Airbnb, it was a lot healthier for me to have a home environment, but it felt pretty foreign, not seeing anybody I knew or having any connections in the city.
Absolutely. How did you cope alone with no family around, no husband, and without seeing your other kids?
I think I was just on survival mode. I look back and I'm not sure how I coped. I don't think I coped very well at times. I also had this immense fear of judgment. Like mentioned, Scott was my 5th baby. So all my other babies, I just got to take home. I was a capable mother. I could do this. And all of a sudden, I felt like I wasn't very capable. I was being told I couldn't look after my baby. And looking back at some of my pictures, I see how swollen my eyes were from crying. And I don't think I coped well. I missed birthdays. I missed Easter. I missed a boyfriend breakup. I missed teeth getting lost. The start of homeschool. I just survived. I don't think I coped.
Absolutely, Lori. This is a lot of stories that are coming to us from families. And I mean, the NICU is hard anytime, any given time is hard. And obviously adding this extra layer is absolute surviving mode. But what would you now, 5 months later, that you're home with your beautiful baby, what can you recommend other parents to do to cope with this situation? Because I know you talked to me about it, you had some time to reflect. So what can you tell other parents in your shoes right now?
Well, I understand a lot has changed, so that's positive. I hear there's bedside rounds again. I hear there's technology like iPads allowed for communication. None of that was in place when I was admitted. I would tell parents to be an advocate. I insisted that they write on Scott's board, Mom likes to give his baths. Mom will do his baths. Advocate. I'm trying to advocate for some changes so people don't go through what I went through. Everybody needs a support system. I saw my daughter's ophthalmologist when I was in the NICU, and I think he thought I was crazy. I was so excited to see somebody I knew. I felt like I was doing jail time. And I saw him last month with my daughter, and he goes, "You're doing a little bit better." And then he didn't realize I was alone for almost 40 days. Mm-hmm. So reaching out to people, accepting help, and speaking up when the system is broken and we need to readjust.
Absolutely. This is so important. Lori, what do you suggest to other healthcare professionals to support families who are alone at this time?
The nurses and one of the housekeepers, they really were my support system. Some of the nurses took the time to learn my name. They didn't just call me Mom, they called me Lori, and that meant the world to me. It just made me feel like a person, not a number. I want other healthcare professionals to understand that people aren't at their best in these situations. So that woman who seems full of anxiety and stress and is about to derail, that probably isn't who she truly is. It's that survival mode coming out. So to have that no judgment and just continuous offers of support.
Absolutely. Lori, let's talk about getting ready to go home. You spent 40 days in the NICU with your son. Did you have any preparation, any education classes or on one-on-one with nurses on how to care for this little baby at home after discharge?
Well, I mentioned my baby made his surprise appearance on my oldest daughter's 17th birthday. She was supposed to get a new phone for her birthday, and I was going to take over her old one. So that didn't happen. I was left with really old technology when I was in Winnipeg. I think it was an iPhone 5 I had. All the resources were technology-based, so I really couldn't access any of them, which was unfortunate. I couldn't do that till I got home. There wasn't a lot of teaching that went on. I am an experienced mom, which did me well. But it was hard learning all those things and trying to remember them without having another parent present. My husband really has no understanding of what the NICU is or was like, just my recollections of it. I understand things have changed, but the discharge was pretty limited on what we were given. And the follow-up too, it was just kind of expect a letter in the mail about follow-up. I was a bit worried about that letter. I just got it this week, so that was fantastic, but it leaves people with this gap. Full-time care 24/7, then you're discharged and you're on your own.
Absolutely. Lori, let's talk about discharge day. It was, I'm sure, a celebration day for you and your family. Your husband met Scott in the parking lot of the hospital. So how was that piece of the first reunion?
Oh, discharge day was great. In the NICU, you never really know when it's coming. So Scott had his NG pulled one day and was discharged the next. Because we come from Ontario and the rules were still in place, I could not have my husband come up to the NICU for discharge. I had a really great nurse who helped me collect, I can't even believe how much breast milk I had stored in their freezers, bags full, all our goodies. And she helped me carry those in the car seat down to the front entrance where we waited outside, and my husband pulled up in the van. We were able to load Scott up. He got a quick peek at him. And then we drove to my Airbnb so we could take him out and Daddy could actually hold him.
Well, I don't know if people can actually see the picture, trying to share the picture of your husband with Scott for the very first time. It is definitely a very special moment. But tell us when you brought Scott home and they met his siblings.
Oh, that was so exciting. So my kids have given me heck over the last several months. Mom, you disappeared in the night and you just never came back. So when I finally did get discharged and we got home, we were discharged mid-afternoon. So we didn't return home till evening. All the kids were waiting up. They couldn't wait to meet their brother. It was really heartwarming though. They came to Mom first. I got all the hugs first. And then it was just disbelief. Look at the size of him. Who gets to hold him first? You weren't lying. There really is a baby. Yeah, it was great.
It's definitely a beautiful picture of your family. Lori, how is life now, several months after the NICU?
Life now is great, despite being in the middle of a pandemic. I feel so fortunate. I feel so much gratitude to so many people. Scott is the most popular member of our household. He's everyone's favorite sibling. He's just so loved. It was a rough start, but I'm trying to focus on the outcome, which has been fantastic so far.
Absolutely. Lori, thank you so much for joining us here today. On behalf of everyone at CPBF, we wish you and your family a lifetime of health, because I think that is the most important thing that we need in the world right now, especially during the pandemic. So Lori, thank you.
Thank you.
You for watching us here today, and I want to thank all the healthcare professionals working so hard in the NICUs around the world, and for all the advocates really working to keep families together, because the stories are heartbreaking, and we know how important it is for parents and babies to be together in the hospital anytime, especially now that people are feeling so isolated. And tomorrow, actually, in honor of Premature Awareness Month, in collaboration with CPBF, Pampers will donate 200,000 diapers to support Canadian families and NICUs during November and December. Until the end of December, every time you use the hashtag Pampers for Preemies, Pampers will donate one extra diaper to Canadian NICUs through CPBF. So join us on that initiative. And I would like to thank AbbVie and Pampers for supporting the Preemie Power Week. And I want to thank our team here at CPBF, especially Renata and Patricia, who worked so hard to make this week possible for us. CPBF is a registered charity, and your donations this week will go to our COVID care program to provide therapy sessions for NICU families. Please donate on our website, CanadianPreemies.org. Together we can create a brighter future to all NICU families. And tomorrow I will be back again at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. I will be sharing my personal story with family integrated care and what that meant to myself, my family, and my son Gabriel, who is now 8 years old. I also have Silk Mother, who is a chairwoman or EFCNI, the European Foundation for the Care of the Newborn Infant. She's going to talk about the Zero Separation campaign from GLANCE, the Global Alliance for the Newborn Care. I also have Victoria Di Giovanni, who was a premature baby. She was born at 25 weeks, and now she's 25 years old. She's going to share with us how was growing up as a preemie. And I also have Dr. Stephanie Liu, a pediatrician from Edmonton in Canada, caring for your preemie baby at home. What parents need to know after the discharge from the NICU. I hope you join us tomorrow. Thank you and stay well.